Thank you, Chair, and thanks for all the panellists coming here today. And some of the questions that I have been answered, so I won't go over them. And I think we'll all agree that the last 6 months have been pretty surreal, to say the least. And I think the task that the educational sector has endured over the last few months has been mammoth and logistically incredibly difficult for all concerned, pupils, teachers, anybody that works in the educational sector. So it's a different environment than it was. The world is a different place than it was 6 months ago, and the classroom is a different place than it was 6 months ago, physically and kind of emotionally for all concerned. But my question is rather simple for each of the panellists. Are they satisfied thus far the provision that the Department of Education have made to get things right come this week and last week in relation to children going back to school? As I said, this has been extremely difficult for everybody involved, but thus far are they satisfied with the provision the Department of Education have made for all educational settings, particularly primary and secondary?
First of all, we'd like to acknowledge there's significant work has gone into this. We all know anecdotally that schools have been working right through the summer, principals and teachers in getting the show back on the road, so to speak, during what would ordinarily be summer holidays. So that has to be acknowledged and commended. In general, a lot of the information from the department is reasonably good. It's some of the situations. And I'm just going to speak from the special ed perspective. So some of the situations around special ed maybe need a little bit more teasing out, and some of them haven't been fully considered in our opinion. I suppose in terms of it, we've already mentioned the young people transitioning from special provision into mainstream. Where they'll spend part of their day between both. We've already mentioned the SNAs that are hovering between 3 and 4 classes, 2 or 3 classes, where each one is meant to be a bubble and so forth. And I suppose the one that we feel hasn't been addressed adequately at all is children with quite complex disabilities and medical needs. There's a lot of these children are not going to be back to school anytime soon. We don't believe that the department guideline will allow them adequate access to a full education. In our previous survey back in May, parents were quite clear in that what their children needed was access to a highly skilled teacher, and that they as parents were not in a position to provide that education. So we'd like to see a little bit more thought into that.
From the primary sector's point of view, I think the department have issued huge amounts of information and guidance and support to both schools and parents over the last few months. I think in terms of the primary schools going, and with an ever-shifting, I suppose, environment that's happening, it has been extremely challenging. And whilst also the public health advice has changed over that time. So I think in opening schools, I think they've opened in a very good position with the work that's been put in by the department and the schools. I think the area that does need specific attention is when a child's not in school, whether that's because of the reasons Mark's just outlined, or whether it's because of the reasons like happened yesterday when a class had to go home. What happens? What is the provision for those children and their education? And I think that's a piece where we really need to put some work and attention into, because as time goes on, we don't know how frequently that will happen, or whether there's going to be localised lockdowns that affect schools. So I think that's the area where we really need to do some work.
And I would like to echo both what Anya and Mark have said, and I will focus back again on that grey area where there are children who do not fit into a box and for whatever reason cannot go back to school, that it is of the utmost importance that they be facilitated with a remote education system by the department, because some schools are not in a position to either offer that facility, or nor would they have the infrastructure in place for it. So that is something that is absolutely paramount now, that needs to be addressed for second level students, depending on what, it doesn't matter what year they're in, it is important that that is looked at.